Hear your favorite NFL legends sharing their stories and insights every week right here on Thursday Night Tailgate with Chris Mascaro and Bob Lazari. Take it away, guys.
There's no way out.
All right, now back in making his 10th appearance with us on Thursday Night Tailgate is another great friend of the show, and that's former Chiefs and Jets Pro Bowl kicker Nick Lowery. Let me remind you about Nick's background. He was born in Munich, Germany, grew up in Washington, D.C., and attended Dartmouth College. He got into both Princeton and Dartmouth, but chose Dartmouth, and that's an amazing story, an amazing accomplishment in and of itself. He also has a master's from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. Nick played in the NFL from 1978 to 1996 for the Patriots, Chiefs, and Jets, but it certainly wasn't easy for him. He got cut an amazing 11 times for a guy who should now be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He was a 3-time Pro Bowler, named All-Pro 7 times. He ranks 10th all-time in field goals made and 13th in field goal attempts. He's the Chiefs' all-time leader in points scored. Nick received the prestigious Byron Whizzer White Award from the NFL Players Association back in 1993 for the great work he does in the community. He was elected to the Kansas City Chiefs Hall of Fame in 2009. He established the Nick Lowery Youth Foundation dedicated to helping disadvantaged youth, especially Native Americans. And like we said every time that he's been on the show, again, if Jan Stenerud is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, there is no way anybody can justify not having Nick Lowery in the Hall. You know, a guy who scored 235 more points and made 80% of his field goals to Stenerud's 64. And we are honored that he is back with us again tonight here on Thursday Night Tailgate. Hey, Nick, Chris, and Bob, thanks for coming back on the show.
Welcome back, Nick.
Thank you, guys. You're doing a great job without me. I think I might hang up and just listen to you talking about me. That would be great.
Indeed. So let me brag a little bit more about you, Nick, because we got the Chiefs and the Chargers coming up Saturday night in Kansas City, and I imagine you have some fond memories from the matchups when you played for the Chiefs against the Chargers. I was looking back over your career. You kicked a game-winning field goal 4 times to beat the Chargers. And you did it in November of 86. You did it again in December of 90. You did it again in December of 91 and November of 92. So I'm guessing you're not a very popular guy in San Diego right about now.
No, in fact, one of my favorite memories is lining up for pregame, kicking field goals into the east end zone goalposts and looking at my being hung in effigy basically in the stands. I thought, they must really love me here. I love this. But I didn't realize it was 3 years in a row until earlier this week when somebody sent me an article from 1992, and then I found a football on my bookshelf turned around, and that was the one from 1991, and that was game winner to put us in the playoffs in overtime in 91. And actually the one I remember even the best in many ways, because it was Marty Schottenheimer's first qualifying for the playoffs as the Chiefs head coach, and what he meant to the overall organization, to the city, to the whole region, and how Arrowhead Stadium in 1990 just filled up. That was the year of Barry Word and Christian Okoye, and just incredible. And to kick that field goal in San Diego and qualify, it just means a lot. You just care and you come to love your teammates, and you put in the time and you deserve it. But as you know, just because you deserve it doesn't mean it's going to happen. And that game and coming through for my team meant a great deal, and that started us on a roll of playoffs every year.
So, but talk about game-winning field goals, Nick. Did you ever were there nerves involved? Did you ever start to think about that sort of thing, or were you in that position so often that what? Hey,
was there
no
nerves
big deal.
involved? Was there nerves involved? Come on, guys. I mean, of course there are nerves involved, and it's how you manage it, it's how you play for it, and prepare for it so you're ready for it. And every game's different. So I'll just tell you this: for anybody that's listening, wants to give advice to kids or whatever, here's the difference for me. I used to, line up and do the best I could and try to be accurate, et cetera. But what I found was that last few years, I used to, as I approached the ball, I go left foot at the target and explode. And what that did for me, that was the way it worked for me. For everybody else, it'll be a little different. But for me, that meant be aggressive. What happens when you're aggressive, not trying to kill the ball, but just being aggressive, is the natural flow, right? Your brain works so much faster than your conscious brain does, your natural instinct. That flow, which is what allows somebody who's really skinny in tennis to hit 140 mile an hour, serve. It's that snap, it's that whip. And when you trust that, the ball fights the wind better too. So a little mathematics for you in sports science, if you will. Somewhere between 35 and 40 yards is where the ball begins to slow down when the guy kicks it, depending on how powerful he is. That last 5-10 yards is where, when it begins to slow down, the wind will push it more. But if you are aggressive towards it, you're not filled with doubt, you're not trying to be too perfect, then it will fight the wind better, so it will be less likely to be blown off course. So towards the end of my career, I got better at kicking game-winning field goals. I made most of them. But, you're human, but I found that was the way to get past being too self-conscious. You got to trust your preparation and put yourself in that situation, 100 times every week before, so that when it happens, you're just like you're back at practice.
And Nick, we've talked to a bunch of other kickers. Jeff Reed comes to mind because I've talked to Jeff several times, and Jeff, certainly made a handful of game-winning field goals. You made a ton of game-winning field goals, but Jeff always talks about how he focuses on the ones that he missed. It's sort of the perfectionist in him. Do you look back? Do you remember the game-winning field goals and the positive stuff, and smile about those things, or the handful that you missed? Do they still bother you?
You know what? Of course they bother you because you care. I mean, that's the point. What separates out, I think, the great players at any position in any sport is because you care. You really care, and so it really hurts. I don't think Michael Jordan would say, when I lost, I can remember those 6 trophies and forget about it. No, those times when he lost burned a hole in his forehead, And for me, I can remember when I did miss, I missed a 44-yarder against Buffalo, into the wind and everything, and it just didn't quite go through. And I remember trying to play it, dream it through. Literally, I woke up a couple times saying, look, go through. But because you care so much, you also are absolutely passionate about correcting it so it doesn't happen again. And anybody who studies psychology knows, those motivations, right, to avoid pain is usually 10 times more powerful than gaining pleasure. So, but what you do is you make 10 times as many game-winning field goals as you miss. Then it's okay.
Bob, questions for Nick?
And Nick, we talk about pressure, and I think of this past weekend watching Adam Vinatieri trying to kick balls in a blizzard and actually game-winning type kicks and almost trying the impossible, and how he made that one extra point was beyond me watching replays. But just wanted to get your opinion on those kind of conditions, and maybe what was the worst conditions you remember kicking in?
Oh, I can tell you, it was in Cleveland in 1989, the worst game of my career, and it was about 6 to 8 inches of mud. I hit a 41 yarder to tie it with 4 minutes left, but then I missed a couple at the end, and speaking of that, that was what absolutely just sent something into my entire system. I would never allow myself to feel that again. But those field conditions at the old Cleveland Stadium with the open end, that was really tough. It wasn't snowy, but it was really muddy and loose dirt. But you know what? I came back the next year, and I led the NFL in scoring. I had 24 field goals in a row. I was 34 for 37, and we went to the playoffs. And, so that's what you do is you channel that pain, you channel that memory into something constructive, which is just dogged focus, dogged determination to find whatever you can to make you better. And I felt like I had a better control, not only physically, but of how to put myself in the right state. I actually took some of those Tony Robbins tapes and listened to them and did the homework with them. And what those things do is help put you in that place where it reminds you of how much your brain absolutely determines the state you're in, and remind yourself of that. So when you're in there with 40,000 people within 200 feet yelling obscenities at you, it doesn't matter because you are in control of your state from within. There's that sense of just discipline, and that's really what made the difference.
And that blizzard, watching that blizzard last week, and Nick gives an entirely new meaning to the expression freezing the kicker, right? But I think I asked you about this before. Did you have a certain mindset when people tried to freeze you and delay
Absolutely.
the inevitable in most cases? But what was your, was it an anger? Was it just focus? Tell me more about that.
No, it wasn't an anger at all. It was simply that you're in control. So I always tell kickers, especially, you need to be in shape, so that running out the field is no big deal. If they call a timeout, I would run to the sidelines, kick into the net, and stay with my routine. Stay in control of my thing, not stand out there in the middle. We called 2 straight timeouts against Rich Carlos, and I think that was about 1984. And he, barefoot, it was cold in Arrowhead, and he stood out there, and he'd hit the upright the week before, and that's exactly what he did against us. Almost made it hit the upright, and I kicked 3 field goals in the fourth quarter, and we beat them. I took control of that time. And if you look at the good kickers, the really good kickers, the timeouts actually help them. They've got more time to collect their thoughts, more time to make sure that they got, the place on the field where they want to kick it from. And it's only the kickers that have that weakness that actually can hurt. But you learn to take control of that extra minute you have, and then you run out earlier, maybe 5-10 seconds earlier than you would have anyway, to pick out your target and get ready.
So, Nick, looking at this year's Chargers-Chiefs matchup, we got the 7-6 Chargers. They come in riding a 4-game winning streak, and their average, margin of victory over the last 4 games, 20 points. When you look at the Chiefs, what do they need to do in order to come out on top this week?
Well, they're playing at home with help. They're playing with Matt Nagy calling the plays. Absolute transition at offense. He's much more aggressive, much more imaginative, mixes it up better. They've got a great combination of talent, starting with Travis Kelce. He opens it up. That's what they've done. And Tyreek Hill, I was watching and looking at the different things here, and I think Tyreek Hill is due for a monster game. I just think that he just needs that. He's the fastest single player in the National Football League. And then you've got an interesting thing in Marcus Peters. One thing I noticed was guys that miss a game. When I came back, actually, in 1992, from missing the only game in my career after 212 straight games, I came back, kicked 3 field goals, beat the Chargers. I mean, you love that hunger, that appetite for the game is reminded in you. And I think Marcus Peters, after doing some stupid things and immature things that show just a lack of discipline that's going to haunt him if he doesn't turn around right away, he's watched that defense play a hell of a lot better without him last week against the Raiders. Now he's going to come back, and to me, he better prove something. And I think that's one thing. When somebody needs to prove something, and especially his personality, I look for him. He had an interception in the first game, dropped the second interception. I look for him to have an interception against Phillip Rivers. Rivers is hot as heck. I think he's got 6 touchdowns, no interceptions the last 3 games. Keenan Allen is returned to form. He's got like 1,143 yards, 83 catches. And the thing that the Chargers have now, their pass defense is excellent. So, we're going to have to not make mistakes and keep and give them any confidence. Alex Smith, I swear, as I watch him, there seems to be some sort of concussion issue because he's just not always processing things quite as quickly and definitively. But if he doesn't get the ball away, and if you give Kelce a chance to open it up early, Mitch Morris is out at center, who's, he's always been a staple of our offensive line. But we're playing with more confidence. But the Chargers are playing really, really well. So this baby's going to be a barn burner, not necessarily with high scoring, but just it's going to be a back-and-forth game. And I'm looking forward to it. I think the Chiefs, frankly, this is it. If they want to win the division, they have to beat the Chargers this week, period.
So, looking beyond that, right, is this a Chiefs team that can go deep into the playoffs, or are they still missing something that they need to find in order to get over the hump?
Well, they're missing a pass rush. They had a pass rush last week, but it's been inconsistent the last 2 months. If they regain that, along with the other things I just mentioned, that unpredictability that was there against the Patriots in the opening game when they just destroyed the Patriots in New England. That team in the first month of the year, everybody was saying, these really are the best. This is the best team in the NFL. But they totally have lost that momentum, and they've begun to get it back. So let's see if they can now play 2 straight games where they've got decent defense and decent offense. And by the way, they've added a kicker in Harrison Butker who's extraordinary. I think he's something like 26 to 28 or something like that.
My final question, Nick, was about the extent of field goals and how long can these guys go. We hear it weekly, you know, that would have been good from 70. Now, you hit a couple 58-yarders in your career. Was that probably your absolute max, Nick, or were you just not given the opportunity to go a little longer just because of the odds?
Please. Well, number one, if you look at it, the late, great Todd Christensen in our 85 game Thursday night, I hit that 58-yarder was really 59 yards. We had no, the emblem in the middle, the arrowhead, covered the hash marks. And I know it was 59 yards, but it actually hit halfway up the net. That would have cleared from 65, 67 yards, which is exactly what Todd Christensen said. The 57-yarder hit halfway up the net, and the head coach then for the Seattle Seahawks said that looked like it could have gone out of the stadium. The difference is, guys, the balls today are like, if you ever played baseball, you get that new mitt, that new leather. You can't catch a baseball with that consistently. You have to break it in. And the old footballs weren't broken in. The new ones are. And so the average kickoff, the average punt, magically, over the last 6 years, has gone up 5-6 yards. Guys are kicking the ball 5-6 yards every single time farther. The percentages of 50-yarders has just exploded. Better than ever, absolutely. But they ain't that much better, and they aren't that much stronger. So that's something that Stenard was leaning on me to say something about last year. And I said, Jan, you're already in the Hall of Fame, buddy. Why don't you talk about it? But, you know, the kickers are great today. They absolutely are, but the ball is definitely much easier to kick than it was, and the conditions are better too. So once again, the kickers are great. Kickers are better than ever, but they're not that much better.
Nick, one more before we let you go, and I was sort of refreshing my memory about when the opportunity finally came about for you with the Chiefs. I was reading some things, and Jim Schaaf, the general manager, called you on a Saturday of the wild card game and told you that their coach, Marv Levy, believed heavily in special teams and thought you had some real potential. And you told him, thanks, I got a great job now, hung up. Is that how it went?
Well, it is exactly how it went. I had a job as the only non-attorney on the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, working for Senator Bob Packwood on aviation deregulation, and I'd given up. But then I just thought, I owe it to myself to try one more time, and I didn't even know how to spell his name. I didn't have his phone number. He said he was in the hospital. And this is a great story for anybody that's about to give up on how your life can turn on a dime, because I called a friend, and everybody needs a friend who's, always makes them think a little deeper. And Dick Johnson was my kicking coach and mentor, and he said, Nick, you'll always wonder if you don't call him back. So now I had to find the guy, Jim Shaw. I luckily guessed that his name was spelled S-C-H-A-A-F. Don't ask me how, because that's his strange spelling. But I found him in Research Hospital on the third try, and he just had back surgery. And it blew him away I could find him. And we talked, and they flew me out a couple days later on Monday. It's snowing in Kansas City. And even though it was just $2,500, by today's standards, a joke, that was it to me. Marv Levy saying, we're going to give you a little bonus. We're going to bring you in May. And I just thought I owe it to myself to try one more. My first game for the Chiefs, after beating out Jan Stetter, my first few goals were a 50-yarder, 23-yarder, and a 57-yarder club record. And, I would never have dreamed I could have done that. None of those things could have happened without just sticking with it and working and loving the work, and then great things will happen.
Nick, before we let you go, remind our listeners about the great things that you're doing with your foundation and how they can check it out and get involved.
Well, next time I'd love to talk more about this, because I've been doing a lot of stuff with concussions. I'm actually the national spokesperson for the top CBD company, and the research that's showing, I was on with Tiki and Tierney on CBS Sports twice in the last couple of months about this, but there's great research showing that low THC or zero THC derived from hemp, not marijuana, that's also a huge disinformation thing. Those things are incredibly influential in what's called neuroplasticity. And so when Dr. Bennett Amalu in the movie Concussion, played by Will Smith, says, you can have a helmet, but you can't put a helmet inside a brain, actually, the way you can do that is by CBDs, which influence and create this neuroplasticity, this resilience within the cells of the brain. And it's been shown that it makes the brain 5 times less likely to incur very serious damage. So that's a passion for me, because my teammate was Mike Webster, featured in that film. That's a passion for me because Ken Stabler with the Oakland Raiders, and who'd become a good friend, died of it as well. It's something that will preserve the game. By facing up to it, we can keep and preserve the best game in America with the biggest challenge it's faced perhaps ever.
So is the league receptive to what you're doing? Are they intrigued at all about what research you're coming out with?
Well, I think that the league is extremely conservative, and since 2010 it's begun to turn around and see it's something that has to be done. But you cannot avoid real science anymore, and this is the real science. So it's just about education and once again being persistent, not only for the players in the NFL, but for the 25 and 30% that have left the game at the Pop Warner level. Want to feel like they protected their kids. That's about as prime an instinct as there is. And the NFL is beginning to notice that. And I just hope that we shift, as I said on Tiki and Tierney a couple months ago, we shift that $100 million that $60 million is going to helmet research, and make it $60 million that's going to research here in the interior cellular helmet in the brain itself. That's where the real change will happen. That will be a permanent improvement in protecting players from CTE.
Well, Nick, first of all, we can't thank you enough for as often as you've been a part of the show, and we hope you'll come back soon and talk more about this, because this is an important topic, as you point out, across every level of playing football, and certainly, it could be something huge for the game of football and its continuation and the number of people that play it. So this is something we'd love to have you come back and talk at more length about. We hope you will.
I'd love to. We'll talk about Stanford, UCLA, the Salk Institute, always studies that show this to be absolutely the direction to go. But thanks for having me on, guys. You're the best. Have a great night.
Nick, how can our listeners stay up to date with the great things you're doing, whether it's online or over social media?
You know what? If you can just go to nicklowry.org, NICKLOWERY, and you can check out things there. And you can also go to take a look at Penn Life Sciences and Google me there, and you can see some of the things we're doing to preserve the best game in America.
Nick, again, thanks for your time tonight, my friend. We look forward to catching up with you soon. In between now and then, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to you and your family.
Thank you, guys. Bless you. Appreciate it.
All right, take care,
Have a
Nick.
good night.
That's the great Nick Lowery. And Bob, that's so some really good information there at the end. Goodness knows what will come from that. Hopefully we get the opportunity to get Nick back on the show again real soon, like I say, and give us some more details, because it sounds very important, like a lot of good research, and maybe something that will help this game in the long run.
It does sound really good, Chris, and we have a lot of other guests we've had on this show that have a major interest in that kind of stuff. And when it comes from a Dartmouth graduate with the kind of background that Nick has, again, doing such great things off the field, but again, 18 years as a kicker, and he had brought up that 1990 season, Chris. I don't know if I've ever seen a kicker kick that well in one season, 34 out of 37, and he was almost automatic, and always a pleasure watching that guy kick. Was so good.
Yes, he was. All right, when Bob and I come back, we'll be turning on the Thursday Night Tailgate Spotlight on the Positive, and we'll wrap up the show, and we'll do that all on the other side of these words about our friends over at the Salt Creek Golf Retreat and over at Dan Pastorini Quality Foods. Hang with us. We'll be right back.